Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Today's being we investigate the fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Perfect one, right? Reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalist faith. We believe that all the dimensions of our being carry the potential to do good. We celebrate the gifts of being human, our intelligence and capacity for observation and reason, our senses and ability to appreciate beauty, our creativity, our feelings and emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls. We can use our gifts to offer love, to work for justice, to heal injury, to create pleasure for ourselves and others. Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. The great 20th century Rabbi Abraham Heschel wrote, Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given of faith, an unshakable conviction calling us to self-respect and respect for others. The words of Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, a minister and theologian and author. Today's opening words are number 586 in our book, The Idea of Democracy. As labor is the common burden of our race, so the effort of some to shift their share of the burden onto the shoulders of others is great, durable curse of the race.
As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master.
This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy.
Our reliance is in our love for liberty. Our defense is in the spirit which prizes liberty as the heritage of all people in all lands everywhere.
Destroy this spirit, and we have planted the seeds of despotism at our own doors.
Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves and cannot long retain it.
Why should there not be a patient confidence in the ultimate justice of the people? Is there any better or equal hope in the world?
Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it. Abraham Lincoln.
Faith is Speak through me in all I do and say. Seeds of both meek and strong are scattered in air. Dignity shines undimmed by bigotry's glare. Web of life, may this thread I weave help me bear witness to all I believe. Justice be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Fortune and famine ride the swift winds of chance. Sorrow and pleasure seem united in dance. Web of life, may this thread I weave mingle compassion with all I believe. Mercy be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say.
Our transitional words are number 572. Once again, it is responsorial. What is required? How shall I enter the Eternal's presence?
Shall I come with sacrifices, with yearling calves to offer?
Would the Eternal care for rams in thousands or for oil flowing in myriad streams?
What does the Eternal ask from you?
But to be just and kind.
And live in quiet fellowship with your God.
Today's speaker is our beloved Sara Laughlin. Her topic is faith and trust in times of conflict. A Sunday positioned between Election Day and Veterans Day provides an opportunity to embrace what enables us to survive the strife of conflict.
I had originally planned to talk today about Veterans Day and about the faith that those who enlist or in earlier times have been drafted, the faith that they have that they will survive whatever the conflict might be that they would be drawn into, and the trust that they might have that the people responsible for them going into harm's way would value them to the degree that they could trust that the best judgment would be used in order for them to be served well. But when I noticed the date on the calendar, I thought maybe this is, who knows what that Sunday is going to be like? Who knows how we're going to be feeling on that Sunday? So maybe Veterans Day might sort of be put to the side a bit because of the larger emotion that the country might be feeling today. A week ago or so, I didn't know what this day was going to be like. I didn't know what the community would be like. I didn't know how this congregation might be feeling. And honestly, I put this together last night about 9 o'clock, and I usually like to do but I really was sort of stumped because, wow, what do I say about what's happening when we don't know what Election Day is going to be like? We have lots of day-to-day challenges, lots of day-to-day conflict. The national presidency, the election has been a big, important thing for us to be focused on, but there are so many other conflicts that we have. The COVID situation, I'm so happy that you said the words that you did, because it's very serious, but it brings so much conflict. We all see it every day, to mask or not to mask. Is it okay for me to take it off right now even? To mask or not to mask, to retreat into our homes and not go back out, or just to socialize freely like nothing's happened, like nothing is any different. Some choose to shop in person. Others prefer to hunker down and do Amazon and have groceries called out for and delivered. Of course, we have or racial issues that have never been resolved, or we thought maybe they had been resolved a bit, but they've all bubbled up again. We have different religious opinions or interpretations about how all these things come to play. And we certainly, and perhaps most troubling, we have conflicts within our workplaces and even closer within our families that cause there to be conflict in how we respond and discuss all of these things. Lots of anxiety and even anger, and I know I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I find it necessary to just take time out. When I get so saturated with all this and my emotions rise really high, and I find a level of personality that I really didn't think that I liked, that I didn't think I had, or I didn't like to think that I had. So I sometimes just go to my home and I pull up the imaginary drawbridge on my imaginary moat, and I just push the rest of the world away. Stay off Facebook. Isolate myself, not because it's COVID, but because I just need to have some time to nurture my soul and sort of sort out what I feel about these, or not even just think about the feeling at all, just focus on something completely different. Reflect on things that I have experienced. In 1975, I was a graduate student at the University of Louisville. I had decided I didn't want to be a teacher. That ship had sailed. I didn't think this art education thing was for me. And during my starving artist days, I applied for a position in state government and worked as a social worker for 5 years. In the middle of those years, they tossed out, if you apply for this scholarship or this stipend to go to graduate school and get a degree that relates to social services, we'll pay your salary while you go to school for a year. And I, took that opportunity. While in that graduate program for community development, it seemed very natural for me to go to a National Democratic Issues Convention that was in Louisville that year. I found last night my file. See, if you never throw anything away, there may be a time 45 years later, then you'll find a value to pull that packet out of and honestly, it's fascinating. There are notes in here that I took, and one is, I believe, from a talk that I heard Barbara Jordan, not knowing then how important Barbara Jordan might be, in our later years. Anyway, sometime during that Saturday, I had to leave the conference, the convention. I had to do something. I can't imagine what was more important than being there. But I walked outside of Louisville Gardens, Louisville's main convention center at the time. I walked out the front door and down the steps and onto the sidewalk, and the streets were deserted. It was next to the government area of the downtown, and on Saturday there wasn't anything going on. It was very quiet, no cars on the street. And I walked over to the stoplight to wait for the light to change so I could get to the parking lot across the street where my car was. Now, of course, there was no traffic on the street, but me being the good person at the time was not going to cross a red light. So I'm waiting for the light to change, and I heard something to my left. And I turned to my left, and a block or so beyond, maybe more than a block, I saw protesters filling the street. I think of it now as like a lava flow from one building across the sidewalk, the gutter, the street, the sidewalk, and then bordered by the building on the other side. This flow of people coming in my direction. And they were there demonstrating against forced busing. There was a national mandate to reduce segregation in schools, and that certain communities, counties were required to switch students, bus some students from black areas to white areas, bus students from white areas to black areas. In Washington, someone thought that was a good idea, but the community did not think that. The white families felt very anxious about sending their little white children alone on school buses into the inner city into neighborhoods that were known for their crime and drugs, etc. And the same way, the black families didn't feel comfortable putting their precious children on buses to be sent out of the city, out into the country to rural areas in the county where the Ku Klux Klan was known to be hanging out. So nobody was happy about this busing situation. I was sort of amused when Kamala Harris, of course, in her famous words to Biden, expressed that she was one who had benefited from busing and was critical of Biden for that. But I felt like, I think there's another side to Biden's decision 45 years ago in another situation that I could empathize with him. So I'm standing on the street corner alone, waiting for the light to change, and I sense movement, not sound, but movement to my right. So I turn to look on the right direction in the street, and a dark lava flow is coming. Police in riot gear, helmets, gas masks, shields, billy clubs, like the opposite group from building to building, filling the street, coming toward the direction of the protesters, and also coming in the direction of me, waiting for the light to change. I think today about the lyrics of a Crosby, Stills, and Nash song. Something's happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. It's time to stop, children, look around, think about what's going down. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Out of nowhere, at each elbow appeared a fellow that made me think of a Secret Service agent. They had suits on, and they had wires in their ears before anybody dreamed about an earbud or iTunes. And one asked me where I was going, and I gestured, my car is over there in view, and I'm going to my car. They whisked me across the street. I don't recall my feet touching the ground. But once on the other side, one said, now you get in your car, and you go the opposite direction, and don't look back. There was no problem about that. I did look on the evening news, and there had been a peaceful confrontation. The protesters had gotten attention. They had gotten media attention on the news. The police had stepped up onto the steps of Louisville Gardens, where I had made my exit earlier, and barred the entry so that no one could get into the building to disrupt the convention. And both sides seemed to have been successful in what their intent was. And I left that with a feeling of being in the middle, physically and emotionally and intellectually in the middle. I understood the passion of both the black and the white communities and their feelings about busing. I understood the idealistic view that we need to get people mixed together. We need to have some interaction. And I also understood the responsibility of the police wanting to maintain order so that everybody was safe. I suppose it was earlier in my undergrad years at ISU that I first started wrestling with this idea of empathy. That it's a wonderful thing to empathize and put yourself in another person's position and imagine what it would be like to walk in someone else's shoes. But I remember wishing, I wish I could just let go of that. Just let me pick a side and stay there. Let me have my opinion and go for it and not be teetering, well, it could be this way, or you know what, there's something to be considered about that. So this feeling of being conflicted by being empathetic. As an adult, as a mature adult now, I've sort of come to feel that it's easier for me to pick a side now based on my life experience, and I can sort of say that I feel strongly about this. I'm not so much in the middle about so many things anymore. but I'm especially frustrated and intrigued by how it is that so many very close friends of mine that I have known all of my life, and family members that I have known all of my life, those who I had my origins so closely intertwined, we've now sort of gone off in so many different directions. And how is it that, of course I'm right, no, I don't believe that, but how is it that we can be so different? We had the same foundation. How is it we are so different now? Friends that I have had since I started the first grade at 5 years old. How is it that we grew up together, we shared things, and now we can sit and have a conversation, and some will say such racist, bigoted things that I'm just speechless. My cousins, we've shared so many things on both sides of my family, and I have a lot of cousins, and we're split about 50-50. There are some that I am fortunate that we have COVID right now because we won't be having Thanksgiving together, and some of the things are taken off the table. But at the same time, we're not having phone conversations. And I have actually unfollowed some on Facebook, not of my family, but of some friends that I have just unfriended. I'm done. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about, you're a psychologist, think about how does this happen that people become so different? And I think it's fascinating. And I don't have a lot of time to dwell on it, but I ponder, is it where we have lived, in our adult lives, because we lived in a very rural, isolated area, or because we lived in cities, we moved to different states? Is it because of our education? Is it our college education? And I find these it doesn't mesh that way. These aren't clear indicators. Our church choices, our spouses, our career paths, it almost becomes too complex to really to sort out why it is. It's human nature, I guess. We just blossom in different suns. Whatever the cause, we do have these biases, and these biases do clearly exist. I'm reminded of our congregation words that, to continue to look for what unites us, to consider what unites us is stronger than what divides us, but sometimes it's sure hard to peel back all those layers of the onion to get down to what that commonality is. As a high school teacher, I'm sort of engaged in conflict just about every day over something. And I keep looking up at the COVID stoplight and wait for it to turn green. And I trust that someday that it will be, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. And that sure has created some challenges within the classroom. In education in general, not just in my classroom, but the students seeking their education. When we began the school year, we had A groups and B groups. And half the students, if you're not familiar, were divided by the alphabet into one group. They would come on one day, and another group would come the second day, so that we didn't have the hallways so crowded, and we could give individual attention, but the students would have to work remotely in the meantime. On my last day, or my last hour of each day during our AB days, we're on no days right now because the numbers are so great and the teacher absences are so great that all students are learning remotely right now. But on my typical AB day, I would end the day with a small group. On the A days, I would have a group of all girls, mostly seniors, very confident, very liberal, very fun-loving, very chatty, one of those classes where, you'd like to sort of it's sort of fun to hear what they say and what they share. And very, very fun class. On B days, I would have a group that was mostly boys. And nothing against boys, that's cool. But there was one... There was one particular boy, though, in the group who and there was one girl one girl, a whole bunch of boys, and 2 LGBTQ students who were in the classroom with one of those boys who is a self-proclaimed white racist. So every day I'm sort of listening, we're going through the course of the day, and I'm sort of monitoring behavior, and things are cool, but I'm leaving every day with a little tenseness about what's going to be said or what's going to be expressed that I might need to intervene in some way. Letting students have their freedom, but being sure that everybody's being respected. Eventually, one of those days happened when we're all going to go back to school together. All the A's and all the B's are going to come back into the room, which can be fun. Hallways a little crowded, mask monitoring a little challenging, social distancing. I'm looking at the school board member back here. Congratulations, by the way, Jackie. We should have said this sooner. I'm sure happy to have you at my back, especially if I say anything here that's inappropriate. So the merging came to be, and I was sort of suddenly feeling a little angst about how these two particular, after gotten adjusted to their separateness, how it was going to be to bring those two groups together, sort of like merging teams on Survivor. Who's going to come out dominant? Is there going to be any play back? What's going to happen? Especially when one of my liberal girls, when I informed them we were going to have this change, they expressed angst about being in the classroom with that one certain person who had values so different from theirs. So the merge happened, and the chatty girls were a little more quiet, but everybody sort of got along and did their work and focused on their challenges of the day, and things were fine. And then, of course, there would be that one day when one of my very liberal, chatty girls walks right over to the seat where the certain young man was sitting at his seat, and she put her hands on her hips, and she looked straight at him, and she said, I don't hate you being here. I about fainted. I about passed out. The young man just sort of smiled and looked at her and looked at me, and she went over and sat at her seat and got her artwork out and started working, and then everything was smooth. So in my idealistic mind, I'm hoping that we can at least get along with each other, even if we don't share the same values, and even if our biases are so deep. Hopefully, we can do our best to have some feeling of community where we can live and let live, in most cases. In the classroom, I teach art, as many of you know, and I teach art history. I teach how to draw. I teach how to paint. I teach how to do all these little technical things. But I also teach quality. The curriculum calls for me to teach things about problem solving and about enhancing perceptual skills, aesthetics, and understanding that each student's work on an assignment may be different and should be different from everyone else's in the room, but they all can still be, quote, good. I hope the students take that away. I'm always sort of subtly putting a lot of these things into the conversation there. It's been challenging these days when things that I'm trying to teach about respecting diversity and respecting one another is undermined on the national level. So yesterday morning on CNN, I happened to be watching, imagine that. But I will insert here, I watched more Fox News yesterday than I have in my entire life, just out of curiosity. Early on in the day, I switched over to Fox News to see how they were going to be reporting this, and not to be political, but I was shocked at how neutral that they were, and how informative that they were, and I almost forgot what channel I had on, because I was just listening, and I was so very pleased that they were very neutral about everything and supportive of the and they called it at the same time that CNN did. Anyway, CNN, Van Jones, if you happen to have seen him yesterday morning. Van Jones, panelist discussing the election before he broke down in tears. As a black man said that the news of the new leadership, he said, it's easier to be a dad today, to say character matters. And as a teacher, I thought immediately, and as a teacher, it's easier to be a teacher today, to say character matters. I'd like to close with something that I saw on Facebook. Yet I do look on Facebook once in a while. Sometimes I have to walk away, but I do have to look at it once in a while. And I found this, that someone had posted some words by Nelson Mandela. And you may have heard this before. But in this little couple of paragraphs, he says, after becoming president, I asked some of my bodyguard members to go for a walk into town. And after the walk, we went for lunch at a restaurant. After a bit of waiting, the waiter brought our menus, and at that moment, I realized that at another table in front of ours, there was a single man waiting to be served. And when he was served, I told one of my soldiers, go over there and ask that man to join us. The soldier went, and the man stood up and took his plate and came over, and he sat down next to me. While eating, his hands were shaking constantly, and he didn't lift his head from his food. And when we finished, he waved at me, and without looking at me, he waved at me, and I took his hand, and I shook his hand, and I walked away. A soldier said to me, Madiba, that man must be very sick, as his hands wouldn't stop shaking while he was eating. And I said, not at all. The reason for his tremor is another. The soldiers looked at me in a weird way. That man was the guardian of the jail I was locked up in. Often after the torture I was subjected to, I screamed and cried for water, and he came to humiliate me. He laughed at me, and instead of giving me water, he urinated on my head. He wasn't sick. He was scared and shook, maybe fearing that now I'm the president of South Africa, I would send him to jail and do the same thing he did with me, torturing and humiliating him. But that's not me. That behavior is not part of my character nor my ethics. Minds that seek revenge destroy states, while those that seek reconciliation build nations. I hope we can be the best of our own selves and look at ourselves to be sure that we are being the best that we can be and not just criticize those that we are in conflict with. Maybe be the example that others need to see. And sometimes stepping over into the middle ourselves.
Today's closing hymn is number 193.
Our faith is but a single gem upon a rosary of beads, the thread of truth which runs through them supports our varied human needs. Confucian wisdom
closing words are number 693. And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality. Emil Gudmundsson.